Hello everyone, it's Ty. Star Rail 3.4 draws ever nearer, and while the most obvious excitement is for a certain white-haired super god, there are also exciting changes to a number of 1.x characters to look forward to. And as such, today I thought I'd do a little guide on the only husbando amongst them, our best brooding boy, Blade. For years, Blade has been the only wind destruction character, and regardless of the arrival of some rando out-of-universe newcomer trying to usurp his throne, I think he's still the only wind destruction character who counts. Further adding to his rarity, he was first released all the way back in 1.2 and has only had one rerun way back in 1.6. He also holds the title as the first HP scaling character in the game. It's just a shame it's taken 2 years for the mechanic to be properly supported. Guess there hadn't been a good enough waifu to warrant the design time until Castris. To be fair though, the devs did throw Blade a few bones along the way. He released with a brand new relic set that was designed almost exclusively for him, and while he severely lacked free-to-play Litecoin options at launch, they eventually released a couple for him, albeit 6 months later at the beginning of 2.x, and then another 8 months later near the end of it. He definitely lacks supports to help in any way with his HP scaling, but they did give us a free 4-star healer to increase his max HP and taunt value, even if the increase in HP was effectively imperceptible. But now, with his changes in 3.4, he'll be a fully HP scaling character. His basic attack, which once dealt 100% attack as wind damage to a single target, now does 50% of his max HP as wind damage to a single target, which may seem like a nerf, but it really isn't, and ideally, you won't be using his unenhanced basic anyway. His enhanced basic, which once did convoluted split scaling with attack and max HP, is now consolidated into 130% of his max HP as wind damage to a main target, and 52% max HP to adjacent targets. He still consumes the 10% max HP to fuel his talent, of course. His skill is mostly unchanged, consuming 30% of his max HP to enter the Hellscape state for 3 turns. During this state, his basic becomes enhanced, and he gains a 40% damage bonus. Same as it was before, but now he also gains increased aggro. Not quite a taunt, unfortunately, more like the sort of increased aggro provided by Japard's Major Trace or from various light cones. Of course, we all know how little that'll actually mean, since every enemy'll still focus fire our freaking Foxians. His ultimate is also more or less unchanged, and still makes use of an HP loss tally. That is to say, when Blade loses HP via any means, the amount of HP lost is accumulated as Death Sentence HP loss on his status page. That value, which caps out at 90% of Blade's max HP, is used as additional damage for his ult. With that in mind, the actual ultimate first sets his current HP to 50% of his max HP. If his current HP is below 50%, he will raise his HP back up to 50%, which is effectively a self-heal. If he's above 50%, his HP will be lowered, but that difference is considered HP consumed, so it's added to his HP loss tally. A win either way. Then he does 150% max HP plus 120% of his HP loss tally as wind damage to a main target, and 60% max HP and 60% HP loss tally to adjacent targets. His HP loss tally is reset to 0 to be accumulated again as the fight continues. It's nice to see an increase in damage and the removal of the vestigial attack scaling. His talent still has him gain a stack of charge whenever he takes damage or consumes his HP up to 5 times. Upon reaching max stacks, his charges are reset and he does a single AoE follow-up attack, dealing 130% max HP as wind damage to all enemies and healing himself for 25% of his max HP. So, again, the only change was to his scalings, which is a bloody shame because they should have done something to allow for overflow stacks in my opinion, but anywho, effectively, he's still the exact same character we've known and loved. just now without the albatross of dual scaling hanging around his neck. But they did give his major traces some serious glow-ups. Cyclone of Destruction is the least changed. It still increases the damage of his follow-up attack by 20%, but now his follow-up attack also regenerates 15 energy. The first sign that they really want Blade using his ult more often. Vita Infinita is completely changed. Instead of increased healing received, his ult now resets his HP loss tally to 50% instead of to 0. That's incredible for his ult, but even better for his E1, which we'll get to later. If you're worried about the loss of his healing received bonus, don't be. Never-Ending Deaths is picking up the slack. No longer the mostly useless heal when hitting weakness-broken enemies, no. It now picks up the 20% healing received bonus from Vita Infinita, but also adds 25% of any healing Blade receives to his HP loss tally. So now, even being healed increases his damage. Overall, he's basically the same mechanically, but surely there must have been changes to his gear over the past 2 years. Unfortunately, it turns out not really. Blade still struggles with crit rate. He only gets 12% from his minor traces, and that's it, so he needs a lot of help from his gear. As such, his best in slot is exceedingly conditional. If you have his signature and or his E2, which heavily compensates for the lack of crit, his best will actually be 2-piece Longevous Disciple for the 12% max HP, and 2-piece something else. In this case, something else can be either Eagle of Twilight Line, Pioneer Diver of Dead Waters, or Wave Strider Captain. Pioneer provides the highest damage output, but it requires maintaining a debuff on the enemies for him to get that 12% damage bonus. As he doesn't apply his own debuffs, you'll have to be running him with a debuffer for this to work. That's not too much of an ask though, since Blade works wonders with debuffers as damage amplification. But if you don't want his damage contingent on specific characters in his team, 2-piece Eagle's 10% damage bonus is next in line. It's a little less damage than Pioneer, but you won't feel forced to play him with any specific characters. Finally, Wave Strider Captain, the new 3.3 set, does alright for itself, giving 16% crit damage on its 2-piece. But crit damage ends up rather oversaturated from substats and light cones, so the damage bonus of Pioneer or Eagle can end up giving better results. However, all of that is irrelevant without the crit rate from his signature or E2. The amount of crit rate rolls you'd need on a 2-piece combination would severely lower the amount of crit damage and HP percent rolls he could have, which would result in less damage overall. As such, without his signature or E2, unfortunately his best in slot still remains 4-piece Longevous Disciple. Longevous is the only set at present that increases max HP with the aforementioned 12% from the 2-piece, and the 4-piece gives a stacking 8% crit rate bonus when taking damage or consuming HP, which Blade will do constantly. As such, it's basically a permanent 16% crit rate bonus, saving you 5 or 6 crit rate substat rolls that can be used for HP percent or crit damage. Sadly, that's pretty much it. Scholar Lost in Erudition isn't a viable option for Blade because while the 8% crit rate on 2-piece seems nice, it's not enough to compensate for the crit rate from his signature, E2, or 4-piece Longevous. And if you have his crit covered with his signature or E2, there's no need for the 2-piece at all. And the 4-piece is mostly meant to buff skill damage, which is no good because Blade's skill doesn't do damage. And while 4-piece Musketeer of Wild Wheat increases basic attack and speed, Blade no longer benefits in any way from the attack percent on the 2-piece. Finally, while 4-piece Eagle of Twilight Line seems like a good idea, as it's the win set, the extra turns from the action advance don't quite make up for the damage loss from the lack of crit or the loss of max HP from Longevous. So how about his planar options? Surely they're better now after 2 years, right? Well, actually, yeah. Another thing we can thank Castorus for. Bone Collection's Serene Domain is, without a doubt, his best in slot, giving 12% max HP and 28% crit damage when his HP is 5,000 or higher. And you'd really have to go out of your way for Blade to have less than 5,000 HP. Now, if you're really struggling for crit, you can still use Rudolent Arena or Inert Salsado for the extra 8% crit rate, but I would definitely recommend you shift your build to use Bone Collections. Beyond that, there aren't really any other viable options. He doesn't benefit from the attack on Glamoth or Fleet anymore. The speed from Calpagni or Giant Tree isn't worth the entirely useless secondary abilities, and Celestial Differentiator is the most ridiculous piece of garbage in the game and is useful to absolutely no one. Just go with Bone Collection's Serene Domain. Your main stats are what you'd expect: crit rate chest, speed boots, wind damage orb, and HP percent rope. For substats, you likely guessed it, you'll focus on crit rate, HP percent, and crit damage, and ideally, speed or flat HP as your fourth. Blade's light cone options are, sadly, just as limited as they've always been, and really, his changes further limit him, since now he can't benefit at all from the many light cones that give attack percent. His best in slot 5-star is, of course, his signature, the Unreachable Side. The 18% crit rate it provides is a massive quality of life addition, and the 18% max HP is obviously beneficial to his whole deal. Plus, whenever the wearer is attacked or consumes their own HP, they gain a 24% damage bonus, which is effectively permanent for Blade. The trouble with his signature, though, is that it has become even less free-to-play accessible. While it can be picked up from the shop, purchasing it requires the new Light Cone memory shards, which, as of writing this, can only be acquired from the paid version of the Battle Pass. But even then, you only get one shard per 6-week Battle Pass period, and it costs 4 shards to buy the Light Cone, so you're talking at least 5 months to get all 4 shards just for S1. And that's pretty much his only option for 5 stars. On the Fall of an Aeon, while never much of a great idea for him before, now does nothing for him, because he no longer scales in any way from attack. Meanwhile, Miday's Light Cone also gives 18% max HP, which is useful, but Blade doesn't use his skill to do damage, so the rest of the Light Cone is pretty much useless to him. Plus, hey, oi, don't go stealing from Miday. You honestly have better options in the 4-star range. One thing we've seen the devs try to do over the years to keep Blade relevant is pump out some very suspiciously specific 4-star light cones, and his best free-to-play 4-star option is the most recent of them, Ninja Record Sound Hunt. It gives 24% max HP on equip, which is incredible, plus a 36% crit damage bonus when losing or restoring the wearer's HP, so again, basically permanent for Blade. But maybe your ninja record is currently being used by Miday. Well, in that case, use the previous Throwing Blade a Bone 4-star, Flames Afar. Whenever the wearer consumes 25% max HP, they heal back 15%, which is all well and good, but they also gain a 50% damage buff for 2 turns. Not too shabby. The biggest trouble is that the buff can't be reapplied until 3 turns have passed, so there's a ridiculous 1-turn lull where Blade is buffless. But it's better than nothing, and it's a really easy light cone to get. In fact, you may already have a copy or two since it's given as a quest reward during Penacony and can drop from several weekly bosses. Your gotcha alternative is a Secret Vow. At S5, it provides an unconditional 40% damage bonus and an additional 40% damage when attacking enemies whose HP percentage is higher than the wearer's. While the condition isn't often met, the 40% constant bonus alone averages out to be a slightly better damage output than Flames Afar, and the conditional bonus just helps push it that little bit further to be entirely better. But It's a gacha light cone you'd need at S5 to be competitive with those other free-to-play options. Finally, I thought I should at least give a passing mention to a surprisingly strong 3-star. Mutual Demise gives a whopping 24% crit rate when the wearer's HP is less than 80%, and Blade will find himself at that point regularly. But while the 24% crit rate is a great help to his gearing issues, allowing him access to the higher damage of two-piece combinations, its lower base stats and lack of any other damage still leave it behind the shop 4 stars. Because its huge crit bonus is from its superimpositions, though, it's not bad as an interim light cone. It's just not worth heavily investing Ascension and EXP mats to level it up when you could be instead investing those resources into Ninja Record or Flames Afar. So overall, his light cone options remain limited. I can't even recommend his signature because it has basically become an exclusively paid light cone. Maybe in the future the system will change, and if it does, or if you are a regular Battle Pass purchaser, then sure, get his signature from the shop. But my free-to-play Husbando recommendation is to use Ninja Record. If it's currently being used by someone else and you'd rather not share, your next best option will be a Secret Vow if you have it at S5, or Flames Afar if you don't. Finally, if you're completely new to the game and you don't have anything else to give him, Mutual Demise will do until you unlock the shops and can buy Ninja Record or Flames Afar. If Blade and his signature actually have proper banners again, is it worth it then to pull for his signature? Honestly, probably not. His light cone is technically quote-unquote in the shop. It's just unfortunately in that unprecedented manner where the only way to get it is to buy a battle pass. It's a very clunky situation though, which I think, and severely hope, Hoyo will rectify in the future, at which point pulling for his signature will have been a waste. Ninja Record is a very good free-to-play substitute for the time being and is completely free. Now, if you very much love Blade and want him to have his best light cone right away, and you can't wait for the possible future when his signature is well and truly free, and you have the pulls to spare without ruining your future savings, then sure, go ahead and splurge on him. It is his best light cone, and will probably always be, so it's not a terrible investment if you can manage it. This hypothetical Blade rerun brings up the question of Eidolons. Are they new and amazing and super worth it now too? Well, they're mostly unchanged, but they're still pretty good all things considered. The only Eidolon that's truly different is his E1. His old E1 increased the amount of HP loss tally that's applied to his ultimate from the usual 100% to 150%, and that's still the case. But now, that HP loss tally also applies to his enhanced basic attack. Combined with his new major trace where the tally only resets to 50% after ulting, that's pretty incredible. His E2 is the same 15% crit rate bonus while in Hellscape state, but that still remains incredibly beneficial to his gearing. E4 increases his max HP by 20% whenever he drops to 50% or lower. This is a stacking buff with no duration, meaning a permanent increase in his damage as the fight progresses. And E6 lowers the charge stacks required to do his follow-up attack from 5 to 4, while increasing the damage of that follow-up attack by an additional 50% of his max HP. So he'll follow up more often, and he'll hit harder when he does so. That's pretty great. So my free-to-play Husbando recommendation is to definitely lose your 50-50 to him as often as you can. I'm not really sure how to make a recommendation here other than to say, yeah, definitely put Blade in your Celestial Invitation list, and with luck, you'll lose 50-50s to get him to E2. Or even E6, why not? Point is, he's pretty great, and losing 50-50 to him is actually a huge win. Now, if he ends up getting a normal rerun banner, that's a little harder to call. On the one hand, updated as he may be, he's still a DPS character, so he's still subject to the incessant march of power creep. Inevitably, he'll fade from this glow up, so spending pulls on him when you could have just waited to get him on a 50-50 loss might be something you regret. But on the other hand, and while I am loath to foment FOMO, who can say when or if he'll ever get a rerun again beyond this hypothetical one? So I would say, in a scenario where he's on banner again, if you really want him, and you just don't have the patience to deal with being subject to the whims of 50-50 fate, and most crucially, as long as you're not ruining your chances for someone else you want in the future, then you can't go wrong with picking up, at most, his E0. That way, you'll have him and can just enjoy his growing power if you lose 50-50 to him going forward. And then also, if you still have pulls to spare and are inclined to get it, you may want to get his S1, since otherwise it's only currently available in the shop with paid Battle Pass reward currency. But again, that's all really just FOMO talking. Overall, your pulls will probably be better spent losing your 50-50 to him while pulling for other characters, and then using the free-to-play Ninja Record or Flames of Far on him until Hoyo fixes the egregious misstep that they've made and make his signature weapon available without having to buy the Battle Pass. For instance, maybe you'll get him while pulling some of the team members that he very much appreciates, like Jiao Cho, who's a great damage amp for Blade since vulnerability doesn't care whether you scale on HP or attack. In fact, debuffers as a whole are a good fit for him, from Welt and Silverwolf, who's also getting buffs in this patch, to 4-star options like Pela, or, well, I guess that's sort of it. Luca, technically, though his vulnerability is only single target. And then there are some new Harmony characters that actually work for him now, like Sunday. The action advance is fantastic, and the crit rate, crit damage, and damage bonus are very impactful. The Harmony harem as a whole has become more accommodating to him. Unfortunately, many of his 4-star options have become less so. Hanya's skill applies a damage buff, which is still great for him, but the attack increase on her ult is now wasted. And while he appreciates the damage bonus and energy from Tingyun's ult, her skill's attack bonus is completely useless to him now. But it's fine, we still have RMC as a fantastic free-to-play option for Blade. Action advance and true damage, plus the damage bonus buff that he'll give from either of the 2 light cones that you're certainly using on him. For sustains, Blade wants healers. Your Luochas, your Gallaghers, shielders prevent him from getting hit, which prevents him from building charges on his follow-up attack and for increasing his HP loss tally. He can be run with shielders, relying solely on his own HP consumption or the HP consumption from others, but it's not ideal. Surprisingly, as a testament to the bones the devs have thrown to Blade, he actually has a couple of non-support characters that can be of benefit to him that I thought it might be remiss not to mention. Specifically, Jingliu, Jade, and Castorus. It can probably be argued whether they're support for Blade or the other way around, but in either case, all 3 of these characters have a mechanic that will drain Blade's HP, which adds to his charges and to his HP loss tally. And unlike Mide, who cares about the amount of health he loses, Blade only cares that HP was drained in order to gain a charge, so all of these characters can play well with Blade if you happen to have them. In fact, Blade just plays well with basically everyone. He's a wonderful secondary or sub-DPS. He's not very SP hungry, only using skill once every 3 turns, and while he almost never uses his basic, and his enhanced basic doesn't restore SP, the SP positivity of the rest of the team can compensate to make him effectively SP neutral. Enough so that I've even had pretty good results using Blade as sub-DPS with Imbibitor Lune, full triple enhanced basics from him and everything. Just FAFO is all I'm saying. He might just be that little push you need for that last star in Endgame. So yeah, I'm pretty psyched to see Blade get a new lease on life. If you've seen some of my endgame runs, you'll know how tickled I always am when I get to use Blade, and he's actually beneficial. So for him to get mechanical buffs that make him legitimately viable and not just niche, that is exciting. But what do you think? Are you excited to see a shiny new Blade, or do you think he'll always be old and rusty? Let me know down in the comments below. And that's my guide to Blade 2.0, or where's Blade 2.0 Me Day? So I guess this would make him Blade 1.5? I don't know. In any case, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you like this sort of thing, then please like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell to be notified when I post something new. Next up on my schedule will be my Finon guide. Ooh, super excited! So if you want to see that, be sure to subscribe. Anywho, thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you all next time. Bye!